We're into a federal election, and just this morning, watching as Stephen Harper is the Conservative Party leader holding a campaign rally and talking about the need to crack down on drugs in this country. He was questioned extensively about what's going on in British Columbia, on the West Coast, Vancouver in particular, with marijuana stores, dispensaries all over the place. Mr. Harper continues to hold the line and insist that his government is going to crack down on pot, marijuana sales, that pot is a dangerous drug, and that the majority of Canadians want the government, the Conservatives, to do something about it. I'm not sure that my next guest would agree with everything that Mr. Harper is saying. Brent Stafford is a communications specialist. He has a company called Shaky Egg Communications. The reason I've invited him to join me this morning is because he wrote rather extensively in an editorial piece talking about forget pot. It's time for the government to do something about fentanyl and the number of deaths and overdoses that are taking place right now at the coast. Brent, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I was rather intrigued by the position that you took. You certainly clearly spelled out how dangerous fentanyl is. I mean, we've got the police with news conferences saying, know your source, be very careful what's out there, because there are a lot of people dying right now.
It's amazing, actually. We really do need to restructure our thinking when it comes to drugs, and part of that is a re-strategizing of the war on drugs, the failed war on drugs, and then double down on it is really my opinion on this. First of all, you have to legalize pot, because that in and of itself is causing so much problems when it comes to the fighting the much harder drugs, the heroin and the other opiates, and then, of course, cocaine and methamphetamine. So you first have to legalize the marijuana, otherwise you can't properly fight the war on drugs. 67% of all of the police reported offenses in 2013 in Canada, 67%, 73,000 were cannabis-related. We're talking in the billions of dollars just to enforce that law, not to mention the taxes that are being forgoed because we're not taxing it. And what it's doing is it's complicating our ability to be able to, fight the harder drugs.
Well, I'm seeing another train of thought in this as well, talking about Insight, the safe injection site that the Harper government attempted to shut down, even going to the Supreme Court of Canada. And yet, given what's going on at the coast right now, it would seem that Insight is probably perfectly positioned, and never has that facility been more needed than it is right now.
Well, it's funny you said that, Phil. The column you read is my Duel column. It's a political battle that we do every week for the last couple of years in 24 hours here in the Lower Mainland. And we wrote about Insight 2 weeks ago for the holidays. So really the fentanyl piece followed our Insight. And I'm not a big fan of Insight at all. Look, let me tell you this right now. Here's an example of where our policy of tolerance and leniency is really getting us into trouble here. The health officials over the last couple of days, when they're talking about the fentanyl issue, they're warning people that there could be something that's harmful in their heroin. This is what they're telling people. There's something harmful in your heroin. Excuse me, heroin is harmful. So when you have this policy, which is our 4 pillars policy in Vancouver, which pretty much is a capitulation to the entire heroin use, I think that feeds into this problem. So I don't believe that Insight is helping. Sure, it might be reducing the overdose deaths within a 500-meter radius around or 5-block radius, actually, around Insight. But still, these people, they're overdosing and they're getting zapped back to health with Narcolone, and then it just repeats the cycle again. Nothing is really happening in terms of solving the problem.
So as I'm going to run out of time on this one, I can tell, but I guess I find myself looking to successive chiefs of police. I can still remember major medical news conferences taking place where high-profile, the chief medical officer and so on, constantly pointing to statistics which would basically suggest that Insight was the number one tool, the front line in the fight against, tragic deaths due to overdose.
Well, I mean, yes, they hover over the person and wait for them to go into an overdose, and then they shock their system back to being alive. So you bet, overdose deaths are down, but that doesn't address any of the issue when it comes to people starting heroin, people staying on heroin, people getting off heroin. In the downtown east side, there are 15,000 injections of heroin a day in 24-hour period. 15,000. And nothing is being done to stop that.
So if we're to just sort of focus on two things, one, you're suggesting that the war on drugs is a failure, which I'm totally in that canoe with you. And you're also suggesting an inordinate or ridiculous amount of money, time, and attention is being spent on trying to conduct a war on pot, which has been lost a whole long time ago. Where do you sit with regards to the medical marijuana dispensaries that seem to be springing up on 3 out of 4 corners at an intersection?
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, regulation's obviously the key. I mean, that's why we have regulation, is to regulate economic, social, environmental activity in the country. So, I mean, they really should be regulated. And when it comes down to it, you're fighting there an interesting case, because the whole pot culture is one that has very much always been, activist, anti-establishment, that kind of thing. So, all of a sudden clamping down and putting a little bit of control on them, they kick up a little bit of a fuss. Let me say, though, regulation is the key. Legalization is the key. Remove it from the war on drugs so you can focus on cracking down on the harder stuff that we should be less tolerant with. And Harper completely has this wrong. I mean, I'm on the right-hand side of issues. That's what I defend and write about every week. But when it comes to this issue, Harper's just completely wrong. And unfortunately for him, he had an opportunity to probably gain a lot of votes from a lot of people that wouldn't have even considered voting Harper if he had actually gone the way of actually legalizing it. He probably would have secured his reelection.
So the only place you're suggesting that the crackdown should be enacted would be in dealing with the hard drugs. Take the resources off the pot patrol and really, really bear down on the hard drug side of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? And why not have a little social shaming? It seems that everything else in our lives is, subject to political correctness and being shamed. But yet, the people who do most of the shaming are also the ones that are like, oh, no, the heroin people, they're okay. Don't get mad at them. I mean, we really should be saying that it's not cool to be using heroin.
Yeah, I don't know where it was ever decided that those kinds of drugs were cool. But I think that certainly the West Coast had its eyes open when that couple, who are, as I understand the stories that were produced around them, this is a husband and wife. They are not regular drug users. They are occasional users kind of thing. And the next thing you know, both of these people are dead, and their 3-year-old is now an orphan. Yeah,
and that's what happened. And that's in this whole fentanyl thing, when it comes to the laced stuff that's hitting into the recreational user, that's really spillover from what's happening in the hard drug using world, right? Because fentanyl is something that's coming into the province. It's running up through the Okanagan, in fact, actually, straight into Alberta. The problem is really growing in Alberta, so I don't know what numbers you might have up there in the Okanagan. But that recreational lacing is really happening as a spillover from the harder drug use.
All right. Brent Stafford is with Shaky Egg Communications.